Thanks for, coming along here and enjoying. I'm looking forward to our conversation. And the way I like to kind of kick this off is, to kind of get a better understanding of what got you to love this sport. Whether it was
Yeah.
as a player, getting into it as a coach. Was there one person? Was it was it a coach? Was it a family? What about it, drew you in,
Yeah.
and what kept you going?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Enjoying reconnecting
Yeah.
and speaking just like as we used to do just so often. But yeah, the question's a good one. I was a basketball player, like first and foremost. That's
Mm,
what I thought I would actually play in college.
mm,
So I grew up playing a lot of basketball. I grew up on Long Island. But my town didn't really have a rec league or knew that I didn't really know, but I remember vividly going to see my aunt up in Levittown, and driving by a field and seeing nets. So I liked hockey, and I loved basketball. And I saw these big nets on a football field, and I had no idea what they were.
mm,
And so fast forward a few years, I was playing baseball. I had gotten injured, so my neighbor down the block had a stick and was like, "Hey, are you interested in having a catch?" And from that moment, I was hooked. And I remember my first stick was a Brine shotgun,
mm.
so really old school. And then from there, it just sort of was in the background for a long period of time. I liked playing, but again, I was still a basketball player. I went to high school thinking I would be playing basketball in college. Um, I got called up to the varsity my sophomore year, so that was on the lacrosse team. So that was lucky. We played in the Catholic League. I went to Holy Trinity High School on Long Island, played against Shama at St. Anthony's, those types of teams. Um, and I took it seriously, but I didn't really know where it was going to go. My senior year, I had a coach, Bob Rule was his name, and he really showed me that there was a path to playing college lacrosse. Basketball had sort of petered out a little bit. It was tailoring off. I really wasn't all that good. Good enough, but not good. Um, and I was a median attackman in high school. And he said, you might want to think about picking up a pole.
Mm,
So I ended up doing that a little bit. So our school wasn't all that big.
yeah,
We didn't have specialized players. So I actually would play attack, then catch a break, run midfield, and then I'd run LSM.
mm,
So that was sort of the gist of it. Coach Danowski, I was lucky enough to Coach Danowski recruited me. I was also very unfortunate. I said no to him the first time. Ended up going to Ohio State. And while I loved Ohio State and still do, it was just not the right place for me at the right time in my life. And I
yeah,
transferred back home, and Coach Danowski took me on as a walk-on. So I would say the person that really showed me there was a path lacrosse was Bob Rule in high school. And then I was really fortunate to just have a stable of incredible, guys, coaches that were able to coach me. Obviously, Coach Janowski, Coach Tierney was a coach my senior year. Um, and from there it just sort of took off. So I got
mm,
really, really lucky to be around them. So I was a walk-on for 4 years. I played a little my junior and senior year, where I was able to solidify my position, but as a defenseman.
mhm.
But I was also surrounded by just incredible players at a level that I had never seen before. So,
Sure.
so
Yeah.
that's sort of the background of the story of it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and I think the beauty of our sport too is that if you have an athlete who's played other sports, who kind of
Yeah,
gets, some of those, different concepts, you can play our sport, you can play the
yeah,
sport of lacrosse and have a lot of success with it, just like you, like
yeah,
the amount of stories I've heard of like, people who just like maybe pick it up junior, senior high school, but then go on to have a great college career, right? Even
yeah,
professional careers too. And,
yeah,
I think, looking back on it too, I mean, I grew up around a coach, and I had a stick in my hand since I was probably two, you know, and but I think, as I got older and I started to do like my dad had me coaching his camps when I was like, in
yeah,
high school, right? So,
yeah,
you know, when you start trying to teach kids, how to play the sport that may have never played it before, And maybe you saw it, as a coach too,
Yeah.
at Gunn, right? Frederick Gunn School. And when you were there, do you think what were the biggest things maybe for you as a player? From like a skill perspective and kind of like
Hmm.
what you taught other kids to help you really propel. Because it can be, like you said, like someone put a stick in your hand, you fell in love with it.
Yeah.
But it could also feel really awkward, right? And really
Yeah.
challenging for someone who's never done it before.
Yeah.
So what would you say like, were like the biggest things for you to really getting comfortable with it, and maybe how you took that, kind of knowledge and
Yeah.
translate it as a coach, through your successful career so far?
Yeah, I mean, so I remember falling in love with the stick, and I actually started stringing my own sticks,
Mm.
like and doing like I got to be really, really into it. But I also was the stick was always in my hand, like. But my friends and I played a lot of sports, so that actually really helped. I remember we had like a Friday afternoon gang, as I like to call it now. We would play pickup, football, pick up basketball in the schoolyard stuff, right? Sandlot type stuff, stickball, tennis, anything and everything, right? Lacrosse wise, not a lot of my friends played. So I would actually go to this high school down or junior high by my house, play wall ball. They'd have a net out most of the year. The nets actually had, if I remember correctly, it was like chain link fence in the nets, so you didn't have to
Oh,
worry about
wow.
nets ripping. Yeah, it was like
Yeah.
old school stuff, gritty. So like you didn't have to worry about nets ripping and stuff, and you couldn't move them because they were so heavy. So I'd be
Yeah.
able to shoot, but having and then also just playing in the yard.
Hmm.
I built my own net out of wood and would shoot on the net, or I would just have we'd have this low wall, like a 3 foot wall. So I would like throw it against the wall, pick up like tight one hops and stuff like that. So um, how that's translated to me is sort of the idea of fun,
Hmm.
especially for students that maybe are new to the game, or even students that want to play at the next level. Like you have to enjoy what you're doing, right? So making this an enjoyable experience, finding joy in it, having fun. And also making it okay to make mistakes. I like to say our practices when I was at Gunn, that's where there was the proving ground. So that's what I like to call it, right? Like I wanted creativity, I wanted mistakes, I wanted to celebrate, and I was really lucky to have coaches around me that taught me this stuff too, that would say, you know what, you made the right type of play, it just didn't turn out okay. So we're going to celebrate that.
Yeah.
And that builds confidence when somebody knows that your coach has your back, right? So for me, it was always around developing the player and making sure that they felt I was putting them in a place that they could grow and get confidence to the best of my ability. We were able to take at Gunn a lot of two-sport athletes that maybe had played, and then we also had students that had never played, and actually over time just be able to create an environment where they would actually get some quality minutes. And the second sport athlete were really stars for us.
Hmm.
So but for me, it was finding joy and always the tangible. Like I used to go back to the tangible. Like what was the first, like I failed miserably throwing and catching, no doubt, but I always came back to it. So what was it? Like, was it tactile? Was it the stick? Was it like, and that's where the stringing came in. Like I actually just love that type of stuff. So talking to our guys about that as well. What is it
Yeah.
that made you come back? Because you're never really good the first time you try anything,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah, and to kind of carry on to that, I think like you kind of said it earlier, growing up, like you always were playing sports, you had a stick in your hand, right? I
Yeah.
remember playing in the backyard with my brother with fiddlesticks, and like,
Yeah.
it's like, and I feel like, in some ways, some of the youth has lost that a little bit, right? Like
Yeah.
the young
Totally.
kids, like, it's like just go out and play something, get
Yeah.
creative, right?
Yes.
And I think, the way that, that translates is, the more fun you can have off the field, like you can kind of incorporate that when you do maybe go try practice or go play
Yeah.
lacrosse or any sport really.
Oh,
And I,
100%.
and I think there's a lot of people out there trying to like bring that back, I think
Yeah.
in a good way, but I
Yeah.
just, I feel like there's so much pressure, with like youth sports right now that kids can't find that joy,
Yes.
and so for you to kind of have that be as your kind of main thing is I think
Yeah.
is amazing. And I think it's something that a lot of coaches should do in the
Yeah.
sense of like, how can we make this, fun, engaging?
Hmm.
And that would just kind of lead me into one of the questions I had for you. I mean, in
Yeah.
the sense that like, you were at Frederick Gunn School for what, 12 years? Was that, do I have that
Yeah,
right? Yep.
12
Right.
years. Yep.
And you've built that program to be, a really strong program in New England,
Thanks.
and the prep
Thank you.
level. And I think that you know that doesn't go unseen. And how do you take a program that, it's a smaller school in Washington,
Hmm.
Connecticut, right?
Yep. Yep.
How do you take a program like that and like put it on a map like you did, with all the
Yeah.
other big preps in New England?
Yeah.
Between the culture, recruiting,
Yeah.
what were your core principles there as a coach to really help propel to bring that program to where you brought it?
Well, thank you. I'm touched that you said that. Thank you. A little embarrassed.
No.
Um, uh, let's see. First, you never do it alone.
Hmm.
That's one, right? So honoring the people that came before you. So I came to coaching later in life. So graduated from Hofstra, went to work in the business world for a while, really met some and had some of the best bosses in the world that supported my dream of actually coaching later in life. Where a lot of bosses wouldn't have said, "Yeah, you can take off at 2 o'clock or to go coach a youth league with your son's not even old enough to play in it," right? But I had
Yeah.
bosses that allowed me to do that. And that allowed me to grow and be curious. I
Hmm.
got to Gunn. I was a volunteer assistant. So Mark Conklin
Oh yeah.
was our head coach.
Hmm.
And Mark was just an incredible, I mean, like the whole Conklin family is an incredible lacrosse story.
Hmm.
So Mark was the head coach and he, allowed me to, my wife was working at Gunn at the time. I was telecommuting in and Mark said, yeah, you can sort of come in. And I was a volunteer assistant my first year. Then I was hired by the school and I was the defensive coordinator for two. So Mark Conklin and Seth Lowe were coaches and they were both head coaches. So I was immediately surrounded by, from I went from coaching youth and a couple days a week to then coaching at a high school level 6 days a week, surrounded by two of my really good friends and guys that knew the game really well and taught me and gave me opportunities to grow and teach me where I made mistakes in a really constructive way.
Hmm.
Um, and then I just tapped into, so I had that. I then took over a few years later. Seth Lowe still was our assistant coach and really gave me sound feedback and advice all the time. But I also tapped into the network that is the lacrosse community. Joe Amplo had started Marquette around that time.
Hmm.
Joe played at Hofstra. So I knew Joe from my time there. So I was like, what is the secret sauce, right?
Yeah.
How do I do this? The IMLCA convention was just a treasure trove of
Hmm.
just sitting around guys. Joe talked to me a lot about culture and like how do you build it from scratch. So I inherited something, and I like to say I inherited a really good program. I just needed to put my touch on it, and I didn't know. Honestly, the first year we did all right. The second and third year, I really struggled,
Hmm.
and but had confidence in where we were going because of the people around me. I was fortunate that my wife supported my vision. I was, like my family supported it. Um, and then just talking to people about different things. I'll never forget Joe about culture, John Galloway about how do you structure a practice. Like I saw him at IMLCA and was like, I really like what you're doing. Can I get on a call with you? And he gave me time to do it. I probably won't remember, but he gave me time to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But the culture thing was really, really important. We were Gunn, we're a small school, 175 boys, somewhere in that range, 325 students. So we needed multi-sport athletes, which was really important to me as a former multi-sport athlete.
Yeah.
We also needed students to give back and honor what we were trying to do. So whether that was being a tour guide, whether that was being in student government or dining hall manager, those types of things, it was bigger than just the game. Um, and boarding school is really unique, as you know, in the fact that you're able to be around the guys a lot more than I would have been able to at another type of institution.
Hmm.
So I was really fortunate in the fact that they rubbed off on me just as much as I rubbed off on them. And I was able to adapt what I needed to do as the times changed. So really, really fortunate. The recruiting, yeah, we needed to recruit.
Hmm.
The Washington, Connecticut doesn't have a youth lacrosse program. I mean, Litchfield does, but not in the town. So you
Right.
really needed to go different places. So we were out a lot of different places, but we were always looking for people that fit with what we were trying to do as a school.
Yeah.
And also that I thought would bring something culturally to the school that would be really helpful for us. So we had guys from California, Texas, Montana,
Yeah.
North Carolina, as well as in Connecticut and New York and stuff like that. So, but I was really fortunate. The people that surrounded me, and I knew I didn't know everything. But I was really lucky to get coaching along the way through all of them.
Yeah. Lacrosse is such a small world, and
Totally.
the fact that you can call two Division I
Yeah.
coaches and get some feedback just says a lot about
Yeah.
our sport, our culture itself, and
Totally.
that sharing the love and sharing the
Yeah.
work is unbelievable. And I'm kind of in the
Yeah.
space too where I'm doing that, trying to do that with the lacrosse drive stuff. But you mentioned something about the practice plans, and
Yeah.
and what do you think throughout your career there as a head coach, the program, what was maybe I don't want to say like biggest change, but was there a change you
Hmm.
made with your practices that you really said like, okay, like this is really, helping us grow as a team.
Yeah.
Was there one thing or a few things that you might can remember about it?
Yeah, I think so. So Jamie Monroe, another great resource,
Yep.
his podcast. He fundamental, like, so I look at my tenure as a coach pre-COVID and post-COVID, like things changed pretty rapidly within our sport,
Hmm.
especially within boarding school, pre and post-COVID. And it gave me time to reflect, and I'll never forget. Well, first, let me step back. What you remember as a coach is what you remember your last playing days as. So my first experiences coaching were more of like I would need to run a college level practice, and that's just not true, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
not
Right.
fair to the kids, and but
Yeah.
that's all your brain remembers.
Yeah.
So that was a big change. Like, tailoring, knowing your audience, and who are you coaching, what are you doing? So that was a rookie move by me. The other one was really looking at how do you tune your practices up to ensure peak performance. So over time, we started going less time, but actually more focused, more reps, less standing around. So I could run a 2 hour practice like nobody's business in the early days, and then I would get down into that sort of 75 to 95 minutes. Let's get the work done.
Mm.
But also really concentrate on our reps and keeping ourselves, what are we looking to train for? And those are for games. Now, some of that was Jamie's influence. Some of that was we were playing more games than over time. The games that we started playing were more intense. We played more of them. I
Hmm.
think we probably played 13 my first year. By the last year, we're up to that 18 range. So all
Oh,
of a sudden,
wow.
your team, yeah, right. So that changes strength and conditioning, adding that into our seasonal workout. We hired a great strength and conditioning coach at Gunn by the name of Josh Bannon, and he was instrumental in that. And then I think the last thing was really Connor's influence. Connor Mooney, who I know you've
Hmm.
spoken to, like Connor and I have been really good friends since our 3D days when Seth Jacoby brought us together.
Yeah.
But he really brought in the concept of like playing more three by with the guys, like 3 on 3, and getting multiplying touches. He'll compounding touches, I think is his word, is what he uses. But hat tip to Connor.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But that we would do that on Thursdays after a game
Mhm.
on Wednesday, and that would be our warm up, right? So the concept of free play, adapting to what the students' bodies needs were, I think was probably one of the biggest things I changed within the practice plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that was just over time. You realize you have to have an EQ to figure out what you know and what you don't know and what the students are actually going through. So,
Absolutely. And, especially where you were, at that prep school level. I mean, you said you had that many
yeah.
games and like the season's so short, and
Yeah.
and people don't understand how crammed it is, and it's
Uh-huh.
just like you do, like you said, you have to manage your players, and I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I think you making those practices shorter is
Yeah.
more efficient is genius. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it gives the kids more time to, maybe do some stuff with that 30 minutes that they may not have been
Yep.
able to do before. So,
Yep.
no, that's good stuff. And then, so since then you have, you moved to Nashville, you started
Yeah.
Project 33 Lacrosse, right?
Yep. Yep.
Which
Yep.
focuses on training. So now you're kind
Hmm.
of in that training element too, right? So
Yeah.
where you're more one-on-one, small group.
Yep. Yep.
How are you
Yep.
translating some of that stuff you were doing at Gunn to now
Yep.
in this new environment down in Tennessee? And maybe you can talk about it and
Yep.
kind of what you like the growth of it down there and just what's going on. Because from what we've heard and what you've told me before, like it sounds amazing. Like the kind of
Yeah.
opportunities down there for kids to play and to grow the sport.
Yeah, it's been great. So it was a family move. My wife took one of a dream job down here, and as you know, we have two kids, both at Ole Miss. So we had been talking about getting down south, and then when I got down here, I was really lucky to connect with Joel White, who runs Nashville Elite, and so I coach with Joel, for his Nashville Elite team. So that's been really cool to see. The market is just young when it comes to lacrosse, and I'm going to use
Mhm.
what Joel said. Like it looks like Atlanta did 15 years ago, right? So we know what Atlanta is now.
Mhm.
Um, so for me, it's really exciting to be in this new space, to meet players that are really athletic, that are just in need of more just coaching. And there are really good coaches down here that I've been thrilled to connect with. So to watch, now it's a state sanctioned sport in the high school level. So there's a state championship. I think that started last year. So it's growing, and there's a lot of, I'm going to say this and somebody from Nashville will correct me, but there's a lot of transplants in Nashville. So there's a lot of obviously people that grew here too, but there's also these influences for the lacrosse market from California, from New York, from Connecticut, from Massachusetts, that where people are coming. So you have this wide variety of player. You have a player that really knows, like that's been taught, and you have players that are really curious. So from Project 33, I started that November of 25, a few months ago. It was basically just I'd love to coach, and I really wanted to get back into coaching, and I was like, how
Mhm.
can I do it? So Um, I'll be coaching Ensworth High School in the spring as their defensive coordinator. But in the meantime, I'm still itching to teach, and I still love to coach. So working with players on skill development, making sure that they're um, everything we do is about footwork. It's building confidence. It's a lot of touches, so we're doing either individual sessions or group sessions. So it's been fun to watch that grow organically with me, for me, and watching the kids get better. Um, the club scene, like I said, is just really young down here. So,
Mhm.
but there are really great coaches. So I've been excited about the growth, and the opportunity that it provides for us here. So I'm this feels to me like where I'm supposed to be. And like my whole thing is growing the game. How do I give back to a game that's meant so much to me? Um, and if that's by just providing some insight and wisdom to students and giving them skill development in a different way, then that scratches an itch. It was a big change from being a head coach to not, as
Mhm.
you probably know. Um, but at the same time, it's incredibly rewarding because now I can actually just focus on skill development rather than some of the other things too, the recruiting and
Yeah,
that type of stuff. We're still doing character stuff. We still talk about doing it the right way, especially in the team environment and leaving it better than you found it. And
sure.
we talk all the time about making the right play, and respecting the game, right? So
Mhm.
so bringing that type of culture and that type of training has been really life-giving to me down here.
Yeah. And I think like especially at the youth level, it's even up in New England,
Yeah.
maybe everywhere, but I feel like the biggest kind of, place where kids are held back a little bit is kind of IQ, right? In this
Mhm.
growing IQ, whether that's from an individual standpoint or a team standpoint.
Yeah.
So I guess, my question is, hearing you talk about, what you're doing with the Project 33 and the high school teams,
Hmm.
um, is there something you do that you've done in the past as a coach, but what you'll do now, as a skill coach and,
Hmm.
obviously now as a D coordinator to really enhance some of that game IQ? Because in my opinion, I kind of feel like that's what separates players. I mean,
Yeah.
there's training, people are looking for that training,
Hmm.
like what you're doing, just because I think, the rise of club and, especially, I guess it depends on where you live, but,
Sure.
the sport's growing and people really
Yeah.
want to start, finding a way to, get better and grow in our sport.
Yeah.
But are there ways that you're doing it from a small group or individual
Yep.
standpoint, that kind of it goes along with what you would do as a team.
Yeah.
If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
It does. It does. I ask a lot of what I've really transitioned to later in my career, Gun, that I'm trying to bring here now is allowing students to self-correct.
Hmm.
And I forget the book. It might have been Teach Like a Pirate that I read. Um, anyway, I try to coach without saying much, like giving positive feedback or when something goes awry, asking what they did. For example, yesterday I was out with somebody um, and I saw them drop their hands on the shot, right? Like, and we're just doing form shooting, fly swatter and then form shooting stuff.
Yeah.
And I saw them drop their hands, and I'm like, 10 years ago, me would have been like, don't drop your hands, don't shoot at sidearm, right?
Yeah.
But now I'm trying to say, okay, like, what did you do? Right. So there's that on the form technique. So coaching like that, where they're figuring out what they're doing. Um, everyone inherently, when you make a mistake, right? So then it's just identifying it. Communicating really well. The best experience I ever did was coach girls hockey. And I'll tell you why. They wanted to know why we were doing a specific drill.
Yeah.
And they would do it and run through the wall for you, but they were asking why. So that made me a better communicator.
Yeah.
And then from the IQ perspective, explaining why. So that's the communication factor of, hey, I pass the ball, I look at you, or I have the ball, I look at you and I don't throw it. Guess what? You're not getting the ball, even if you're open. So like you got to cut through now, right?
Right.
Offensively.
Yeah.
Defensively, it's don't be afraid to get beat because you're going to have help with you. So engage the person rather than getting back. We see that a lot of off-ball stuff. So we're bringing in a lot of basketball, manu ball, guns out type of stuff as I use my Long Island hands here. But those types of scenarios are what you see. The stick skills and the athleticism there, it's then just translating a sport that's really unique and different. It's a
Hmm.
combination of soccer, hockey, and basketball, right? To students that are just worrying about throwing and catching. So everything starts with feet. It
Hmm.
all starts with the footwork. Even offensively, as we get into shooting, it's like, how do your feet need to be? Where do your feet need to be? Like, walk through the drill before you demo it with them. Like, okay, everyone walk through this. It's like a dance step, right?
Hmm.
And then explaining how it translates into the bigger picture of a game. Okay, so like, why are we doing this drill? Well, if the ball's swinging from top right to top left, now you're going to split and go, right? Like, and how do you do that? So those are the things that I see. It's more of like asking them probing questions about what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, but in a way that actually makes them the owner of the learning system rather than, well, you did that wrong.
Yeah.
Well, that just wasn't right. And again, that 10 years ago me like would have been, don't drop your hands. Um, and at the same time, that's been helpful for me because I actually walk away feeling better the way I coach rather
Yeah.
than just always correcting.
Absolutely.
So I think if that answers your question, I think it's
Yeah.
one of the bigger things that I'm trying to really do every day when I go out. Like nobody goes out there looking to be bad. Nobody goes out there looking to do a bad job and drop a ball and or miss a shot, right? Like, and they're young, they're not pros. So, it's our job to sort of coach them up and
Hmm.
give them the confidence to go play and want to come back. Like ultimately, like it's such a great game. But the IQ is, it's coming,
Yeah.
and we have we have great coaches in the area that want to do it. And if I was one thing I was surprised about was just how many great coaches and college players are here.
Mhm.
Because I had no idea. Like you don't hear
Yeah.
about it in the Northeast. And again, I was in a bubble, but then you get down here and it's like this great community and people are giving to the game,
Yeah.
which is just awesome.
I think, what you said there, just, love the answer all around between everything. And I love the answer you're saying, just asking the kids questions, right?
Hmm.
And because I feel like, I've even heard it as a player, like too often, coaches are trying to tell kids what the answer is by yelling at
Hmm.
them because they did something wrong, or why did you do that? Like
Yeah.
screaming at them, like, why did you do that? As opposed to asking you, like, you know, why did you make that decision, or what decision could you have made?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I like I work with a club group that we have U12s and U10s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every time, we're at practice or, we're at a tournament and there's a time or a break, we bring the kids in and we ask them questions,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm not trying to tell them what to do because they'll probably never remember, but if they can tell me what they need to do, right,
Yeah.
it might start sticking with them. And I
Yeah.
think as coaches, like what you said, if we just you know, I think at every level, right? Like there's a
Yeah.
certain
Yeah.
point as a coach where you have to understand that like there's little control you have what's going on, almost zero,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
So if we can ask the kids questions, see if they can answer it. Now, if they keep making the same error over and over again, then yeah, you have to really kind of,
Right.
maybe change something up. But I
Right.
think, at that point where you said it, just, asking questions, making them answer and getting it so they can start thinking about what they need to do. That is what
Yeah.
helps build IQ and confidence,
Yeah.
like you said.
Totally. Yeah.
So that's no, that's a perfect answer. I love it.
Thanks.
And
Yeah. I
it's
think to add on to that, like put yourself in their shoes, right? Like
yeah,
they're like, I actually, so growing up, I'm old enough, like we didn't have travel. I had like
right.
6 games in junior high school, right? Like six. They play that in a weekend. And they're in front of their parents. Like we would play on the weekday, right? So all of a sudden you're getting a 10 to 12 to 14-year-old young person
Yeah.
that is competing hard, running hard, right? Doing all these things, and they're worried about 9 different things out on the field, right?
Hmm.
So did I catch it right? Did I do this? Did it like so simplify it, right? Make it simple.
Yeah.
And allow them just to grow and have fun with it, right? So we asked a lot of questions when I was at Gunn. We would, one thing I learned was you can really only concentrate on 3 things in the high school level. Like for me, like for our team, it was like, okay, what at halftime it was like 3 things. What are the 3 things we need to work on? That was it. Um,
Love that.
and then asking them what they're seeing, like before I even did that, like what do you guys see? What are you feeling right now? Like that type of stuff. And it gives them ownership and it gives them accountability to the things that are going on the field. And then it's like, okay, great. I echo that. And these are the 3 things that we need to work on. Right. So making the player feel that they're part of the solution, not just a robot out there, is really important. I also think, um, well, I was just talking about form shooting. I love creativity. So, like, I want people to be able to be creative in that. And if you're just robotically assigning different roles and not playing with principles, then it's not creative. And that's
Hmm.
just not fun, right?
Right.
Like, so I can go
Yeah.
play a video game, I guess. I don't really do that. But if I wanted to play a video game, I could sort of script things. But
Yeah.
you really don't have control. You really don't
Yeah.
ever.
Man. Yeah.
There's very little. I remember drawing up a play one year. It was a killer play and a timeout, and they got on the field and they did nothing. Well, it wasn't even close, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a good lesson too. Just understanding what the bandwidth is, right? Like any system has bandwidth issues sometimes. So that was
Definitely.
just good lessons.
Well, to your point, like, we can run all the set plays we want, but what happens when it doesn't go right? Can the kids
Right.
get out of it? Are they smart
Right.
enough to get out of it or know what to
Yeah.
do? And usually
Totally.
if you're just running strictly off, non-principles and you're
Right.
working off rules, like where there's
Yep.
firm rules of like what to do,
Yep.
then I feel like that's kind of where kids struggle, and
Yeah.
like you said, having principles, a little bit more freedom and creativity,
Yep.
like ultimately that helps a kid grow and helps the team grow. And you had
Totally.
mentioned something, the three things at halftime. So I,
Yeah.
I, I think I read a book a few years ago by Doug Lemov,
Mm,
and he said that's what coaches should do, from a teaching perspective because of like how kids are thinking, right? So because there's
yeah.
so much going on in their mind, and so at USJ like 3 years ago when I started there, and it was right around the time I read that book, I started trying to like at halftime. Now Coach Fink obviously had his own, piece,
Yeah.
but when I had the offense, like I would say to the offense, like guys, all right, here's three things that we are working on or that we're going to do this
Yeah.
half, right? Because I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of times, like if you hear it on coaches, at all age levels, like you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do that, and you give kids
Yeah.
like 10 different things, like they're not going to remember 10 different things, and it's like you try to tell them everything you see, but if you can stick to three things, right,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
resonate with them,
Yeah.
then I think that helps, especially like you're
Totally.
saying from a team perspective of a halftime or
Yeah.
even at the end of a quarter, but like
Totally.
it's no, it's great. And I 100% agree with you on that front for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. We would do things like I would even get granular with not necessarily what I was saying, but where I would say them, how I would say them. So typically, if we go into the corner, if we didn't have a locker room to go into at halftime, where was the sun? So I wanted the sun in my face, and so that the kids weren't staring into the sun.
Yeah.
Where was the crowd? Right, so they were looking like I would turn,
Yeah.
again, thinking about bandwidth and thinking about just limiting distractions.
Hmm.
I also, this is forever years ago, but like the wet paint sign, like don't touch wet paint. The only thing they hear is touch wet paint. Like they don't, so like how do you concise get your message so that they're actually understanding what you're trying to do? So just little things like that too. As a coach, like you don't like I wanted distraction free. Like you wanted to
Hmm.
be yeah, consistency, routine, those types of things. But then when you get into the huddle, okay, you have very limited time, and that was something that developed over time too for me.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you just mentioned earlier, about principles, right? Team
Yeah,
principles, and like being
yeah,
a D guy, and running the defense and all that.
yeah,
What kind of principles would you try to instill into a group
yeah,
or even a player?
yeah,
I guess you could go either direction you want,
yep,
to
yep,
really, help with that kind of team concept, right? Because I
yeah,
think I think from an offensive perspective, like, people talk about principles all the time, like the two-man game, spacing.
right,
But from a
right,
defensive perspective, I feel like a lot of times it's like, oh, win your matchup, but there's so much, you get the chain reaction, the slide and
right.
repo. Like, are there certain principles that you've tried to instill in defenses that can almost
Yeah,
be more freedom in a say to give them freedom, but also to kind of keep the defense intact for
yeah.
protection and all
Yeah, I think one is understanding your personnel, like,
that?
know your people, KYP. So I've always been it's been interesting as a D guy, but also at one point when my son was playing, I actually didn't coach the D. I coached the offense, and this was before Connor joined. So my son was a defenseman, so I was like, this would be better for everybody.
Mhm.
And so I coached the offense. But again, defensively, looking at knowing our personnel. I mentioned the offensive stuff because one year I was like, we're going to run Penn State's offense, and we had
Mhm.
the personnel to do it. I thought we could do it, and it was not good. So it was like, we didn't have Grant Ament on the team. So, so anyway, like that was a good lesson of knowing who you got, what they can do, and then like being able to know when it doesn't go well to be able to change, right? Don't be
Yeah.
stubborn. So
Mhm.
there's that. So one is just understanding who you got, what your players are, and where they fit into your scheme. So I like man to man, but I'm not afraid of zone. I'll snap in and out of it if we have to. But then it's landmarks like on the field. So that we try to sort of understand and make it simple. So we don't want to give away the middle. We want to fight through picks, right? So those are our principles. We don't really want to switch. And it's a last resort,
Mhm.
because we don't want to give room. We love entry and exit checks, right? So as the ball's coming to your guy, try to get a poke there. As they're getting ready to pass, trying to get a poke there. Um, and then extending the field and being what I call like a greyhound defender, where you can actually get out on guys to put pressure, but also not creating offense. So as I look at sort of the what our principles are is defensively, we're defending. The goal of defense is to defend. They have the ball, but we dictate where they go,
Hmm.
right? So those are our real principles. Um, and that allows the students to understand their role, what they need to do, and actually find their own angles in a way. Yeah, I'll teach you angles, but the player has a better understanding of foot speed and where they think they can extend or not, right? So if we give them a principle, want something taken away, it's up to them to then get there. And then we can autocorrect. Like you didn't get high enough. You weren't high, your high foot wasn't big enough or out far enough. Um, and then where do we want to double? Typically, it's like a GLE bite situation, or places that aren't necessarily, going to create offense. So defensively, it's dictating our terms. Don't give up top side, uh, and then fighting through picks. Once you start establishing those landmarks, the players then really understand that. On the backside, obviously, it's always help those types of things.
Right.
So that has actually helped us a lot. I I was never a takeaway guy, check guy. Like, you've seen me. And it's not much different than I was in college, right? Like I was never a takeaway check guy. It was all about body positioning. So everything we do starts with feet. So those are defensive principles that I think actually help. But it's also understanding where does our goalie like to see shots from? Some of them like different sight lines and sight angles, right?
Mhm.
So understanding what that looks like for them too. So it's really communicative with all of them. So it's been helpful. The players have responded well to it down here. Um, you know, as one of the big things that we had to adjust to was sort of the guy's going to dodge on me. What do I have to do? Like, well, go out and get out and engage, right? Like you're going
Yeah.
to get beat. No,
Yeah.
and that's I think fundamentally anywhere, like back in the Northeast, nobody likes to get beat. And it's like you have to make it like not okay, but like you're gonna get beat.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, win
Yeah.
your matchup, great. Like, yeah, you know how many like look away guys there are?
Yeah.
There aren't many.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
so then it becomes the not necessarily a principle, but sort of a pillar of we play like this. We're a fist, not individuals, right?
Mm.
So if you get beat, your brother's going to pick you up on the backside, right? And we're going to
Yeah.
slide and recover really well. We're going to make them make a couple passes so that we can recover into our matchups and those types of things. But we see guys back at Gunn and what I've seen down here is guys on ball that know that their mismatch will give ground a lot. So what we want them to do is get a piece and engage as best they possibly can. So
Yeah.
and defense is lonely, but it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be, right?
Right. No, and that's, that speaks volumes because I know the game's evolved, a little bit with the sense of like how people play two-man game, less
Yeah,
downhill.
yeah,
But I just, as in college, I was a midfielder, on the offensive side more than the defense, but obviously I had to
yeah.
play defense. So, when I got involved with the defense there and was playing, we practice slide and recovery so
Hmm.
much, that we just knew
Yeah,
from a midfield perspective, hey, when this guy's like you said, we want to force them down the alleys, right? And
right.
and we're probably sliding more likely than not, and knowing and expecting that we are, but we knew
Yep,
exactly how to
yep,
slide to the ball, how to Rico to the to the crease and bounce
yep.
out. We did it so much that like
Yeah,
it was almost habitual, where like
yeah,
guys would just slide to slide, even sometimes when you didn't
yeah,
need it, and
yeah,
maybe that wasn't the best case, but you'd rather have help than not, right?
yeah.
So
100%.
I think to your point, like, those principles of just knowing like, hey, this is the direction we want to put players, really focusing on that recovery package of working together on defense. And I feel like if you have that stuff together, like you can mesh everything else in, right?
Yeah,
But it's even more confusing now with the wing pick plays, the all the different sets that these colleges are trying that you see playing. And
sure.
I think like I think it's definitely a challenge from a defensive perspective.
Yeah,
But I think at the same time, to your point though, like you can still try to dictate, you can still
yeah,
make first contact, right?
right.
Entry
Yep,
contact, as you said. you can still, slide and recover. It's just looking at it differently than like maybe it did 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah, I think the biggest philosophical is, again, the goal of defense is to defend. Like it's not to take the ball away, it's
Hmm.
to defend, right? And then your job's never done,
Yeah.
right? So like from a younger player perspective, what I see is, and what we work on and will continue to work on is the guy passed the ball. My guy passed the ball. I won. I did my job. And actually, your job now just started. Like you won your matchup in that way. You got the guy to pass. Now you got to go help your brothers, right? So I taught brothers a lot, to get back into the hole. Basketball was the best experience for that for me, playing
Yeah.
defense basketball wise, right? Because you got to pack the paint. You got to and it's tight quarters, but and then people shooting threes, it makes you extend a whole bunch of different things. So like from a young player, I tell all our guys, like if you can play pickup basketball and concentrate on off ball. And I never understood that growing up. Like people would say, oh, off ball, off ball, off ball. And it's the most important part of defense right now. The on ball,
Yeah.
everyone wants to win their matchup, but off ball
Yeah.
is where it's at. If you can be a great
Definitely.
off ball defender, people know.
Yeah. Absolutely. And do you, from that point, I guess
Yeah.
I had two roads there I was thinking about at first
Yeah.
before you said that, but the first one was like, we talk about playing with your feet defensively, right?
Hmm.
A lot of young
Hmm.
players now, if you even look at eighth grade, freshmen, sophomores, like they're using these long sticks as defense,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
They're probably gaining some bad habits because they think they have to take the ball away,
Right.
right? It's got to be a challenge to teach kids how to like, even like with my 13, 12-year olds, like some of them have long poles and we make them, we ask them to cut them, can't make them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
are there ways that maybe, because a kid has a stick, he's like, oh, I can throw checks, but like, how do you maintain manage that, and how would you manage that, like from the youth
Yeah.
level? Is it just giving them a short stick, or is it just making it shorter? Like, what would you do in that situation?
Yeah. That's where three by comes in really well.
Yeah.
Because you can only play with shorties. So there's that. For me, I wish our game would evolve in that way where there's a couple things now being sort of seeing youth for the first time in a very long time.
Hmm.
Soccer, I think, does it really well. If you look at youth soccer, they modify the goals and they modify the field. Like, I'm at a youth tournament now, and the kids, unless you're really little, they're running cross field. Like, it's a long field for smaller legs, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I hope sixes helps with this,
Hmm.
and I really do think it will. So I commend stuff that the PLL is doing, like shortening the field a little bit, but also like the sixes where it's really looking at transition and speeding up the game, but also like what sticks are allowed and stuff like the box, for
Yeah.
example, also great for that. Like getting defenders to play with shorties in the box is
Mhm.
something that I'm really looking trying to do
Yeah.
because there are a few down here. Um, so all that aside from the technical, like the equipment side of what we're trying to do, if I have a long pole that's really young, we're basically like you're not checking the guy, like you're
Hmm.
not there's no takeaway checks. We'll auto correct that, but it's also how do you approach, how do you stand. So there's a lot of those. Where's your stick?
Hmm.
um I was fortunate to coach Eddie Rahill, who's up at Cornell. And one of the things we went to see his game last year, and one of the things we noticed was that defensively, their six were lower than their waist defensively 99% of the time. And we
Hmm.
asked him, like, what, Connor and I and Blake Hollinger, our assistant coach, were like, what's that all about? He's like, oh, I don't know how it came about, but I think Gavin Adler did it. So we all started doing it. And it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it's just a brilliant little pickup, right? Of
Yeah.
I think knowing that players evolve, knowing that, you know, the depending on birth date and all that other stuff, like you could have a kid in the same age group that might be 12 months ahead of another person physically.
Hmm.
So like just trying to teach the fundamentals
Yeah.
of you need to get out on stick, you need to not throw that takeaway check, you need to, those types of things are really, really important. And then really working on angles
Yeah.
and bringing in footwork. So I don't know, that's a long-winded answer of saying I actually like shorties a lot. It's just a matter of like getting kids to be able to sort of get a shorty in their hand to play defensively. Basketball again, no sticks. We would do a lot of we call them stubbies. So we'd take broken sticks and like tape them up and like have our defensemen play with just the shaft. So they would
Yeah.
in high school, so that we put pool noodles around them, um, so
Oh,
to
good for
protect.
you.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so like we would do that so it wouldn't hurt people. But like, you're not taking the ball away there. You're actually just running with your hands, and like you always have to have two hands on that stick, right?
Yeah.
So that really does help. The defensemen hate it, but it really makes you work on your feet.
Yeah. Force them to do it, right?
Yeah,
Well, Mike, you're an amazing ambassador for the sport, and everything
thanks, bud.
that you've done, that you're doing is terrific. And I like to kind of, finish with a last question that,
Yeah,
again, you can take it however you want, but
yeah,
as a coach and like what you've done throughout your career, what you're doing now, if you were to give advice to like a younger coach who's
mm,
trying to get into the sport, that, maybe coach in high school that really sees themselves as like one to keep doing it, be
yeah,
a head coach, to run a
yeah.
program, what would you give them as, some tips to really, whether
Mm,
it's culture or um, player development, skill development, like
yeah.
what are those kind of tips that you would give a young coach?
Yeah, culture beats it all.
Yeah.
And the talent, the margins of talent, it's all, there's a lot of talent everywhere. What defines you is your care for the people that are under your charge. Your love for them, your love for the game, and what standards you want to bring to your program when it comes to culture.
Mm.
And um, your legacy as a coach is measured beyond the scoreboard. Really, it really is measured by the relationships you're able to bring forth, the relationship that the student has with their program, the school, like those types of things, in you. So concentrate more on that than just the scoreboard. The scoreboard makes it really personal, and I get it. And you've seen me. And I'm no angel when it comes to this, but thinking about the the things that I remember from my playing career are the same things I remember from my coaching career. The bus
Hmm.
rides, the locker rooms, the players. Yeah, we won some games and we lost some tough ones too, but it's all about the people. So just understanding what that looks like. The emphasis on winning, I get it, but we're not pros. We're really meant. There is a place for that, both in the college and the program. I get it. If
Hmm.
you're a youth coach or a high school coach, like it's about developing people.
Hmm.
So if you can keep that in mind, you'll be successful.
I love that. It's a great
Yeah,
answer.
yeah, man.
Well,
Thanks.
I appreciate it, Mike, and this has been
Yeah,
great.
bud.
We should
Yeah, man.
obviously do it again at some point.
Totally. Would love
But
to. Honored to do it.
yeah, let's reconnect soon though, and you
Yeah,
know, share
man.
more.
Happy holidays to you and your fam. Enjoy, and thanks for this. I really, really appreciate it, Brett.
You got it. This was awesome.
All right, bud. See ya.
See you, Mike.